Welcome to today's Snap session, Staying Ahead of the Curve, How to Meet Residents' Evolving Needs. I'm Paul Rasta, Executive Editor at MHN. We're very happy to have you here today. Now, as we all know, the combination of shifting renter expectations and new technology are demanding accelerated innovation in the multifamily industry. So today, you're going to hear insights into how to meet the challenge of adopting these innovations and how to use them to your competitive advantage. You'll meet our special guests in just a moment, but first, a couple of quick housekeeping notes. We've set aside time at the end of the program for Q&A. So if you've got a question, please use the Q&A function on your screen to send it in as early as possible. If time runs out before we get to your question, or if you'd rather get in touch with us confidentially, our speaker will be happy to follow up with you after the program. Also, we will be emailing you a link to the recording of today's webinar, so you can listen to it again and share it with your colleagues. Now, let me introduce our special guest. Suzette LeSane is Senior Vice President and Global Housing Product Executive at Assurant, the global provider of risk management solutions. Suzette, it's really nice to have you with us today. Thanks so much for making time.
Thank you so much, Paul. I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Great. Well, we've got a lot to cover today, so let's just go ahead and dive right in. Now, residents are looking for a more frictionless living experience than ever before. So what are the most common problems that you are seeing among your clients when it comes to the resident life cycle? And how are you helping them meet those demanding new expectations?
Yeah, that's a great question, Paul. For us, as we look at this experience, residents, they want a seamless experience with their landlord. They want to make sure from the time they move in to the time they move out that the process is as frictionless as possible. Our own research is showing that maybe 60% of the surveyed participants would consider signing a lease based only on the experience of a virtual tour or online information. So what we know is it's important to have that informative website, one that makes use of current technological capabilities so that prospects that are looking to move in can find the information they need and they can make the sound decision. Once a resident steps into the property, they are more informed than they've ever been before. And so now the responsibility is for the property manager to convert those leads. And converting the lead can be as simple as reducing the cycle time in the lease signing process, but it could also mean offering deposit alternative solutions that can reduce the cash burden that resident has to put up front. It could also mean offering renters insurance products that are pay with rent options that are bundled with the lease signing process. All of those go towards facilitating a frictionless process, Paul. And they're really, when we think about it, they're really worthwhile for both parties. Additionally, even after that resident signs a lease, the most successful property management companies we find are the ones that are maintaining a strong digital experience for that resident, such as online portals, chat options, social media engagement, smart amenities, and virtual keys. So we do know that this is important for our residents as well as the property management companies.
Well, certainly the tools are out there and it's important to be able to make use of them. Suzette, I'd really like to follow up on a number of things that you mentioned just now. And first of all, let's talk a little bit more about these digital tools. As you suggested, these digital tools really are changing the leasing experience for potential residents. So what is it within that process that you are that you are seeing make a difference for your clients to both attract qualified residents and simultaneously mitigate risk?
Yeah, I love this question because I think a lot of my colleagues in the industry, they're all thinking about the same things here. We're seeing a lot of success with both our deposit alternatives as well as our renters insurance pay with rent options out there. Residents, they love the idea of a lower cost move-in that comes with a deposit alternative. And quite honestly, the property manager, they enjoy the risk mitigation factor of tools like this as well, because they're still able to attract qualified residents. Once that resident is qualified and the option to bundle the required insurance with the policy is presented, it really becomes a win-win for both the property as well as the resident. The resident, they don't have to shop around for a policy. They don't have to look to obtain coverage. It's a rather streamlined process for them to obtain that coverage, Paul. And the PMC, once again, they're helping to offset the risk now because they have this pay with rent option. it's allowing the resident the sufficient coverage that they need, but also making sure that they're reducing lapse as well. So we feel like those types of digital tools are win-win for the resident as well as the property.
Well, and certainly we're all looking for processes that could be streamlined today, right?
Absolutely.
Well, I wanted to ask you about renters insurance. Are you finding that most successful Assurant clients do require renters insurance? And also, could you elaborate on the value of that for operators and residents?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. We're finding that our clients are requiring renters insurance more and more. And over time, the industry is shifting more towards that. We're seeing the number for those that are requiring coverage grow year over year. Renters insurance, it's one of those things where the consumer needs to understand it, feel comfortable with it. But we really do feel like renters insurance is a win-win protection product for both. The consumers can protect their belongings at an affordable monthly premium, while the operator and manager, they can protect their asset as well. So, this is also why operators and managers bundle renters insurance with the pay with rent option that we talked about before. Like our Cover 360 product, the value in this is also helping to guarantee that there's no lapse in the coverage. At the end of it all, Paul, we think that being able to deliver some of these solutions, insurance-based solutions, that both parties are winning and they're protected. And I think that's what's most important to the marketplace and to the consumer.
Well, could you dive a little bit more into deposit alternatives for us? Because we all know that the cost of renting is still increasing in many markets across the country, and that could mean increased risk for operators and managers. So how can deposit alternatives help?
Yeah, this is all a part of the art of the property manager and the property owner, something that we at Assurant have had decades of experience in advising our clients on, and advising them on how to offer creative solutions to meet the needs of their clients. It all starts with knowing the class of the property and understanding the residents' needs and what are their expectations as well as a part of this process. From there, you can offer services that are going to meet the residents' needs and expectations while you're protecting them and while you're protecting your asset as well as a property manager and owner. For example, when we look at our surety product, a flex deposit, it's a guarantee. It guarantees that the landlord has full payment up to the bond amount while charging the resident an upfront fee for that. But that fee is a fraction of a traditional deposit. You are able to, with that, in that example, you're able to attract a qualified resident and qualify that candidate, but your residents, they don't have the burden of that upfront fee that comes with moving in. And that helps offset some of the economic pressures that we're seeing with costs and things like that increasing. So it helps to allow the resident to move in, but also helps them manage the other economic pressures that are going on that we're seeing escalate in the industry.
Sure thing. Well, at this point, I'd like to welcome everyone. And if you're just joining us now, our special guest today is Suzette LeSane of Assurant. And I would also like to remind our audience that the Q&A portion of the program is coming up a little later. So this is a great time to get your question in. And again, all you have to do is just use the Q&A function on your screen to send it in. So Suzette, let's turn to technology now. A huge topic in multifamily, as it is for everyone. But how can the new technology out there help owners and operators market their communities a little bit better? Let's talk about the marketing aspect of new technology, if we could.
Absolutely. Paul, like many of my peers, what we understand is technology has played a huge role in the leasing and residential process. And many property managers and owners have had to evolve their thinking over the years around that, and quite honestly still evolving thinking, because again, we know technology moves pretty quickly. If I think about the segments in this, the younger renters, and I'm talking anywhere between 25 and 34, they make up roughly about 25, maybe 30% of this space. What this group is really after is having turnkey apartments that they can walk into without much thought, quite honestly. And if I think about, my daughter and her friends, that's what they're looking for, everything turnkey. That often begins with having smart locks and the thermostats and the smartphone controlled light switches and everything that we see with these connected amenities. Our research is telling us that 62% of the renters believe that the smart home features and the technology embedded in the unit is one of the most important thing about renting a unit. they're becoming such a commodity, or such a commonplace, such commonplace features, excuse me, that they should be looked at as unit updates, and they're beneficial for not just the younger segment of the market, but for a wider audience. And as such, in order to attract the right audience, it's important that as property managers and owners that you are marketing those things on your website, that your social media presence shows that you have those things, both of which are really expected in the marketplace today by various segments that we've talked about earlier. So it becomes really important to make sure that you're emphasizing the availability of those features.
Yeah, yeah. And it's, to your point, it is also kind of fascinating that there is clearly a generational aspect to this, that it's the folks who are most likely to be the up and coming renters are the ones that have that expectation of technology because they've grown up with it, first of all. And it sounds like that, again, to your point, they really want kind of the no fuss, no muss approach, just streamlining everything, make it as easy as possible.
Absolutely.
So just the least, something they don't necessarily want to have to worry about. So, okay, so we've attracted the prospect there with the technology, the streamlined process. So let's move on to the real heart of the matter, which is closing the deal. So now that the potential resident is interested in the unit, how can operators and managers close the deal with qualified residents at the point of lease?
Yeah, the close, that's so important. It's really more about offering solutions that drive value to the renter, right? We never want to feel like we're positioning and selling products that aren't driving value. The close is offering a deposit alternative as an example. Simply put, the cost of living is going up. We know that's not a secret. Operators and managers are losing highly qualified residents by not offering things like deposit alternatives, because that does make this process easier for allowing people to move in. Deposit alternatives also reduce the cost of moving for the renters, and it mitigates the risk for the owners. And owners and operators who are offering these solutions are winning every time. So if I think about the process to get to close, it's really inspecting what are we doing to drive value for that resident, and are we reducing the barriers for that resident and some of the things that are concerning for them, especially in the climate that we're living in. So I think things like offering alternatives to deposit products like we offer, those are exceptional ways, I think, to help increase your close rate.
Sure thing. And let's talk a little bit more broadly about trends in the industry and how they might be exhibited in certain demographic groups. So are there any other trends that you are seeing impact the demographic groups? And by that, I mean by age, age cohorts in different ways. Clearly, we're familiar with some of the preferences of the younger renters out there. But anything else that you're noticing in that way, the trends that affect the various age groups in different ways?
Yeah, I think we can point out some of the obvious things here, that people have more valuable belongings in their homes than they did 10, 20, or even 30 years ago. We're seeing the residents often own multiple gadgets, think smartphone and tablet and smartwatches and the smart TVs. And I'm just looking around my office and I'm seeing all of those devices. In fact, I'm seeing multiple of those devices. So what we do know is the cost to replace these things have gone up, Paul, over time. And at as the cost rises, the experience of replacing those devices has impacted more and more people over time. And so I think as a result of that, people are seeing that the perception of renters insurance is changing in terms of the value that it could provide. More people see the value in carrying a renters insurance policy because you can see just from your apartment or home, the number of devices that are being protected. The added benefit here is that your assets are being protected. And so the ability to think about the balance between insurance providing that value protection, all the assets that you use every single day, I think that's the win-win in terms of looking at one of, a trend. That's a win-win for our consumers as well, as the property management owners, and making sure that, coverage is being afforded, and the assets are being protected. So that's a clear trend that we're seeing with demographics. And it varies in terms of the number of devices owned, but what we're seeing is across all age ranges and all segments, you're seeing those increase in number of devices held by an individual.
Sure, yeah, certainly that does add a whole new layer to it, doesn't it, right now? Just the kind of devices that we all have right
Right.
now, really pretty much of any age. Well, great. Well, do you have any final thoughts or insights at this point about attracting renters that you'd like to share before we open it up to the audience for Q&A?
Thank you, Paul. I think in this conversation, we covered quite a bit, but I do think it's important to point out a few things. As a Assurant multifamily, we focus on attracting renters and making sure that the products that we provide to the property management companies, as well as the owners, that those products are attractive to the renters. But as housing trends continue to change, and the younger generation operators and managers, we think should focus on retaining those residents. Smart amenities, general and in general unit updates grab the attention of these residents, and we think that's important to make sure that you're marketing these capabilities and these amenities that you have. We think deposit alternatives can also make a difference in how much and how many qualified candidates you move in, and it also helps to mitigate risk, which we've talked about earlier in the program. But we also think bundling renters insurance as with rent payment, these are ways to ensure that there's no lapse in coverage for the duration of the tenancy. A trend that we see a trend that we are monitoring is how the younger generation see renting. There's a mindset shift with the younger generation, and we're seeing that they'll look at renting for longer than the prior generations. And so we want to monitor that to make sure that we understand what are some of the needs as those renters are in the units much longer than they would have been based on previous generations. These continue to be exciting times in multifamily, and I think about the industry and how it's evolved over a number of years. I've been in the industry for some time. And if I think about it, these are exciting times. And I think for the property manager and operators, these challenges are great for us to solve as a community. It's really about how we attract new residents and how we win overall. And I do think, again, anytime you have so many changes happening in a marketplace, I think it's prime for innovation. So I would say that those are just some final thoughts that I'd share with the group that's on today about some of the overall things that we're seeing and what gets us excited about multifamily.
Well, thank you for that, Suzette. And clearly just staying flexible, staying up with the changing wants and needs of your customer, of the residents, is absolutely
Right.
essential to staying competitive. So now it's time to start turning to some questions from the audience. And here's our first one. And it's about renters insurance. So with renters insurance, what are the key coverages that a property owner should consider in a policy for their residents? So how about that? What are some of the other key coverages owners should consider?
Yeah, you want to make sure whatever policy you have, it's going to cover the insured fully, that their assets are protected. We have some, we at Assurant, we have a renter's insurance product. We have a liability only product. We have a pay rent option. For any property, you want to make sure that the policy is going to cover the insured whenever they think they have losses. One of the worst things for a resident is to experience a loss, and then they call the insurance company and they find out, oh, your policy doesn't cover those things. So it's most important to make sure that one, the resident understands the policy, that they have coverage if they need full coverage for their assets as well as liability, that they're fully covered, and that they understand what's in the policy, so that if a claim happens or a disaster happens, that the resident has the right expectation around coverage.
And here's another one that's really, again, very specific to renters insurance. And our audience member wants to know, do you recommend writing renters insurance into the lease as a requirement? And that's part one, really. And can that requirement discourage some prospects from signing a lease? How about that?
Yeah, we think the discipline of renter's insurance and having coverage is something that's important, right? We can't recommend what the property manager should do, but we definitely think that that's an important discipline to have. We think it protects the resident as well as the property, and we think it sets the right expectation with the resident. You don't want your resident when something happens, a disaster happens or theft or anything happening, and that individual is now struggling to make amends for whatever that issue was, as well as pay rent. So we do think that that discipline of having renter's insurance is an important one. I think if property managers and owners require renters insurance, I think you might lose some renters or prospective renters, excuse me. But I do think that the amount that you'll attract that are looking for properties that are sound properties where residents care about their belongings, where there's a level of accountability across the board, I think you'll see an increase in residents as a result of that. So we do think that the discipline of offering that, Paul, helps the industry, it helps the properties, it helps the resident as well. So we overall do support that.
Okay, and next we have one about deposit alternatives.
Yeah.
And our audience member wants to know, what are some of the most important components, I think, to have in a deposit alternative product that the property manager should consider when they are making the decision as to whether to use one?
Yeah. One, it's the flexibility of the product. We want to make sure that if we're doing a deposit alternative product, that the product is, one, attractive to the resident or the potential resident that they're looking to move in, and attractive in terms of price and accessibility. We want to make sure that it truly does cover. There's a number of hybrid products that are out there. And so you want to make sure that you're finding one that fits your property and what you want covered. Ours is one that guarantees the landlord full payment up to the bond amount. You want to make sure that you are very comfortable with what's in the T's and C's within the agreement, to make sure that I am, as a property manager, purchasing or affiliating with a company that's going to take care of anything that happens, or the things that you need to be taken care of as a part of the product. So it's important to make sure you're going to get the right coverage. Again, this is one of those experiences where you don't want that resident moving out and that there's a number of claims, and you're now finding out as an owner or operator that those types of things are not covered. So you want to make sure you're doing your due diligence to make sure the things that you need covered are covered as a part of the process.
Suzette, the concept of deposit alternatives is, I will acknowledge, a little bit new to me, but just for the benefit of our audience, and especially those who may be new to the concept, would you again just maybe walk us through the, I guess, the technical aspects, so to speak, of how it works, what kind of the mechanism of how deposit alternatives work?
Yeah. And so I'll tell you a little bit about ours. There's, like I said, there's a number of hybrids in the space, but essentially what most times if someone's looking to move in, and the traditional way is you pay first and last month's rent, what these deposit alternatives allow you to do is move in paying a smaller amount. So in the case of the flex deposit product, it is a surety bond. And so instead of paying first and last month's rent, you're paying a fraction of that traditional deposit. The traditional deposit is refundable. This fraction, if you will, of the surety bond that we're for flex deposit, it's not refundable, but you're paying a fraction of that. So that allows you to move in paying a fraction. That's not going to be refunded, but what it allows you to do is spend the funds and the cash that you would have for other moving expenses. So that's how our flex deposit products work, and a lot of different alternatives out there. Different products are based on different things. Some are based on credit scores in order to give you the final rate. Some are not. Some different products require different information in order to do it. But key to any deposit alternative product is making sure that you have a flexible product, in that when that resident moves in, that if that resident is paying $300 for a bond to move in, that bond covers them up to $2,500 in up the bond amount, that when that resident moves out, that you as a property manager or owner, that you have that coverage, and that it is in fact covering the items that you think it would cover. But typically those bond products are covering any type of loss. Some of it could be rent, a missed rent. Some of it could be damages that are caused in the unit, things like that.
So let me follow up on the surety product for just a moment with a question that's probably going to strike some of our audience members as a little bit sensitive, but it's a very practical one, I think, as well for our audience, which is with the new surety security deposit product, who covers the cost of eviction? Can you address that?
I think it's going to vary with the product that the property management company or property owner has, and that's why it's important to understand what the policy actually covers and what the surety bond covers. In the case of the deposit product, when you move out, there are expenses that could be covered, like I indicated before. It could be rent. It could be other costs that some of it are subsets to the eviction cost. So the bond solution could cover those types of things, Paul. And I think that's why it's important to understand what is it that I'm looking for as a property management company or owner to make sure that that bond is going to truly cover it. And that's why we think it's important to have an inclusive bond like we do to make sure that those things are being covered as a part of the move out process. And everything, again, we talked about, everything is up until the bond amount that the resident has purchased.
Right. So that's kind of the linchpin here is the amount of the bond.
Right. So your eviction cost, in the case, the example that we talked about before, if you have a bond amount covered up to $2,500, but you have eviction costs of $10,000, you would be outside of that within the coverage, but you would be covered up to the first $2,500.
I see. Okay. Good to know.
Good question.
So we have a time for just to squeeze in a few more questions here. So and here's one that I think speaks to a couple of the observations that you've been making. Our audience member wants to know, attracting a younger, more diverse group of residents is a priority to our company in the markets where our company is active. Mm-hmm. How can these strategies help our team be competitive with these prospects? And is there anything that you can recommend?
Yeah, that's a great one. And I commend the audience member with the question. I think properties have to think about how they continue to evolve. And I think attracting a younger and more diverse resident requires you to do a few things. And we talked earlier about the value that technology plays and having the right website that communicates, having the right social media presence. And I think you have to be able to communicate that culture through some of those mediums, right? You have to be able to show them who you are. And is that to make sure that that property is a good fit for that younger or more diverse individual. But I do think that you also have to think about the types of tools. What are they looking for? Earlier in the segment, we talked about finding out what is most valuable to that renter, what is most valuable to that resident as they're moving in, and what's most valuable when they're in the property. So I think what's important, Paul, is making sure that the tools that are afforded, whether it's technology, whether it's using the things that we've talked about here, like the deposit alternative products to be attractive to that segment, or whether it's doing things like pay with rent option that makes it easy for the resident to pay for their rent, pay for their insurance all in one stream. Those are the things that I think the more creative, innovative property management companies and property managers and owners are using to be attractive to different audiences, because we know that there's not one monolith around, what the renter needs. So I think those are the things that I would be thinking about to expand the profile of the property.
Sure. And again, to your point, really keeping up to date on the tools that are out there, using all available channels for marketing, for outreach, for understanding what the wants and needs of your prospects are, to be sure. Well, that's great. Suzette, I really appreciate your taking time to join us today. I think we're going to have to leave it there for today. But again, just a few quick housekeeping notes to our audience, which is that we will be sending you all in a link to this program so that you can listen again and share it with your colleagues. And very special thanks to my guest, Suzette LeSane of Assurant. Really appreciate all of your insights as well as your time. And last but certainly not least, thanks to all of you in our audience for listening. We hope you'll join us again very soon at another MHN Snap session. Have a great day.
Thank you.